So how can you spot good online analytics content? And, what are kind of the indicators there?
Yeah, this is a great question because I do make a lot of I have some notes here. I do have a lot of courses. I've done a lot with content creation, but it's really something I've kind of thought about to myself, but I've never written any of it down. So here we go. Um, Again, going to this idea of dirty data and data cleaning, I think that a good course, sometimes it's hard to walk through that process
Hmm.
with the course. You want things to be tidy. It's just easier to teach things when you can kind of start with the data already clean. But I think, a good course is really going to walk you through kind of that end-to-end process of, like, how do I even get this data ready to analyze? Because that's a lot of what we do. I mean, I'm not saying 50 to 80% of the course should be data cleaning, but you should know that that's 50 to 80% of the process. So you should definitely highlight that. And again, that end-to-end idea. Um, let's see what else.
So let's say I'm a little guilty in that all the courses I've created, it's a extremely clean data source. In my
It's
defense, though, in my consulting practice, like the data with the companies I'm working with actually isn't that dirty. So like what I've noticed, like I've worked with, billion-dollar organizations, and they tend to have dirtier data sets than like the companies that are 150 million in revenue or less. Because like an example of this is like, um, some of the e-commerce sites that I'm working with use Square, and that's a pretty much a perfect data set. So it's like what was purchased, the category, the time of purchase, and then maybe we could tie it back to an email address, and then I guess having to tie back demographics data to an email address is cleaning up data a little bit, but you're right. I probably, as a content creator, should have more around. Here's what you're going to see, and here's how you can clean up the data.
Yeah, and I mean, that's fair enough because a lot of the times you put that in there and people don't like it. They don't get it. You kind of have to live through it to really understand. I mean, I try to bottle up what it's like to be a data analyst and package it into a course as much as I can, but sometimes it just kind of falls flat. So I think that goes into another topic, which is taking some risks and having some opinion with your courses. Like, there's so many courses that are just kind of this dispassionate list of, here are all the keyboard shortcuts in Excel. Like, okay, I mean, I can look that up on a search engine. I don't need to do that.
Right.
So if you can have a course where, again, somebody's like giving you that mental model of what is it like to be a data analyst? When would I use this? Thinking outside the broader technical tools and thinking really about kind of like connecting the dots between what I actually do. So, if you're teaching a course about Excel, you know, talk about data workbook protection. Like, is it really worth password protecting a workbook? I mean, that's always one of those topics, but I think, students should know that maybe it's not worth it. I mean, let them make their own decision. And I think that's another uh, part of a good course is really putting that student behind the wheel. Like, you're
Hmm.
really more of the guide and you're really letting them kind of take the wheel as much as possible, showing them to actually like do the work themselves. So they're going to come out of the course with something that's kind of like, hey, I made that, like the old paint by numbers kind of thing where, the student has some skin in the game as to how the course is going to end up and trying to add some creative element of it. So, if you are going to have some kind of a drill or assessment, it's okay to make something more open-ended. I mean, it's harder to assess something that's kind of like, now create your own thing after what I've taught you. But, I think that's kind of the real world is not assessed by multiple choice questions. So as great as they are
Yeah.
to make sure that people have that base knowledge, again, you want to get into this idea of like the top of Bloom's taxonomy is create, right? So that's the highest aspiration of a learner is they can make something. So I think
Mhm.
really that's the best course is when you can actually get people to start making something themselves. That's really when you've done a good course, and that's really hard to do in like a 2-hour video course. So like I see that it's not always something that you can do, but that should always be your goal is to try to plant that seed of creation with your data literate students.
Well, that's an idea that I've been kind of kicking around for a while now. Um, so I was telling you before the podcast starts that I've been doing keyword research, and how to build an analytics portfolio is like a golden, excellent key term. Apparently, there are a lot of people searching for it, but there's not very much content. There's content around like Kaggle and how to build out a data science portfolio,
Uh-huh.
but in terms of an analytics portfolio, there's not that much content. So it's almost like I want to go back and give a commentary on the 10 courses I have out and say, hey, look, here is the dashboard that we built in my sales analytics course. Here's how you can take that structure and make it your own. Here's how you can come up with, other questions like, maybe the manager wants to understand, well, how many days does it take to close a deal? And can we segment that by industry? Because then we can really start to give some prioritization to our sales team of, hey, look, sales manager, if you're up against a deadline, you should target manufacturers because they have a third of the turnaround for a sales deal than, the military or the government. Like kind of getting into that more tactical, hands-on space. But I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss of like, I don't think I would be able to have that higher tier thinking if I didn't have all these consulting engagements where, I'm working with the
Yeah.
CFO or the CMO or the CSO, and I'm it's almost like you use the word crowdsourcing. It's almost like I feel like I'm crowdsourcing my content through the consulting engagements that I have, because it gives me like that mental model to kind of root down on.
That's true, and it is one of those things that you kind of have to live to get. But there's so many ways to get it. Just go online. Find the LinkedIn groups, go to the meetups. You're gonna start. It's like with any group of people. You're gonna start to talk and think and act like them if you spend
Mhm.
enough time with them. And if you can apply that, sure, maybe you are fresh out of school or whatever and you haven't had the work experience. But I think, again, if you're a very data literate person, you can build a project that's, take something you like, movie ratings. You could make a cool project out of that. And if you can show, I mean, I've always been a proponent of like really walking your audience through what you're thinking. Like, it's great to just kind of dump, hey, these are these really cool
Mhm.
workbooks that I've made. Like, that's great too. That's probably a huge asset with hiring. But I think especially when you're starting out, if you can kind of like show people through that process, and maybe it is like, let me just share my screen and post that to YouTube. That's a part of my portfolio. And I think for data analytics, yeah, trying to consolidate that all into a portfolio. I mean, I guess having your own website would be good. You could use GitHub Pages. It's a little bit more technical know-how, but I mean, Tableau, I will give them that like the Tableau public thing is
Yeah.
like, boom, that's your portfolio. Don't got to think about it. So yeah.
Yeah, shameless plug here. Subscribe, because on my YouTube channel, although these videos might come before this actually gets published, I'm building out some how to build a Tableau portfolio easy. I mean, Tableau Public is an extremely potent resource that's free to you,
Yeah.
and you can show up to these interviews. But getting back to what you were saying about that, like why, or that meta commentary, um, I think long form content like this is how you get to that why. Like Joe Rogan's podcast, like he has someone come on and they talk about their area of expertise for 3 hours. Like there's this recent scandal with Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's going from, CNBC of having a 15-minute or 15-second clip to let's unpack, my platform. This is an apolitical podcast. We're not like talking about politics. This is just an example. I can unpack these ideas and really suss out the thinking, the why, that meta commentary around this is my thought process. Because it's kind of like the difference between, teaching someone to fish versus just giving them a fish for the day. So
Definitely.
I'm literally working this kind of like thought process out in real time. So feel free to jump in and disagree or comment or add anything.
Yeah, sometimes it does just take talking it out. Like I said, I'd never written anything down or thought about what makes a good online course. I've kind of had little observations as I'm working and,
Right.
thinking about this is good, this is bad, but never really going through, the root cause analysis of like what makes this good, what makes this bad. So yeah, I definitely see an element to that. And when it comes to a data analytics portfolio, again, like being able to show that, you can kind of get inside the mind and that you're going to be easy to teach. Like that's a big thing. It's a steep learning curve. It's a very knowledge intensive kind of profession. So you want to show
Mhm.
that, you're going to be easy to teach, and you're going to show that like, hey, I can work online. And and I even think with like talk about working with, that's a big part of data analytics too, right? Explaining things to clients, working with
Right.
customers, all that kind of stuff. Honest to God, you look at things on like YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever, where I've gone through comments, you go to my blog, I've had comments that thread, like, a couple dozen threads where somebody's asking me like, well, how can I do this? I go through it. I mean, I'm open sourcing my process of like, how do I work with clients? How do I make sure that they get what they need when they don't know what they need, or they can't really explain it themselves? So I think it's a great source, all this stuff with the blog or a YouTube channel or whatever. When you're an employer, look at that stuff. Look at somebody's YouTube channel and just see like, how do they work through this? I mean, that really gives you a sense that like, A, they actually care about what they're doing, because they're not making any money with their YouTube channel probably when they're starting out. They're just
Right.
doing this to help people and have fun. So if they're
Mhm.
showing that much heart and effort and fun when it's not even related to their job, like, hey, this might be somebody who, might do something. Um, so I think that's just, something that is good for employers to think about. And for data
Yeah.
analyst perspectives to think like, oh yeah, I can show like, hey, I can work with clients, I can explain things through online.